Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thanks for listening. I am Kyle. That is Sean.
What up?
And we have an amazing athlete guest today who has had an amazing career as an athlete, both as an able-bodied athlete and after an injury to his spinal cord, he has become an amazing adaptive athlete as well. And so we want to welcome to the show Glenn with two N's, Hartrick. Welcome, Glenn.
Hey, guys. How we doing?
Good, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, Glenn.
So, Glenn, I want to start with just a little bit of background. You were an amazing triathlete. You were like on the cover of Runner's World, and you had all these amazing races and stuff. Tell us a little bit about your career, before you were injured.
Well, thank you for the kind words in the introduction there. Yeah, no, it's something where the sport, multi-sport, running, triathlons, everything in between, from a 5K to an Ironman, is addicting. A lot of people are addicted to certain things, and I'm addicted to racing and pushing myself, and I guess the community that comes along with that. And so back in 2006, I started my first race, I guess, the New York City Marathon. It was something I'd always wanted to do. It was a marathon, and figured I would check it off the list. And once I crossed the finish line, I was exhausted, but had the time of my life. And I thought, you know what, never again. But the registration rolled around for next year's marathon, and I signed up, and I just was hooked from there on. And that kind of propelled me to more and pushing myself and challenging myself and setting more goals. But kind of more importantly, it was the group of people that I've met throughout the sport, through swimming, biking, and running that has made this such a pretty cool journey.
There's something probably really contagious when you're around other people that want to do crazy challenges like that and accomplish, marathons and triathlons. I'm sure that's just contagious. When you're around people that want to do it too, it's really hard to be lazy, I guess.
Oh, for sure. The old saying, misery loves company. So,
sure.
We like to push ourselves and, help each other out. It's one of those things that I find that unlike a lot of other places in life where you want everybody to succeed and do good, right? You want everybody to maximize their potential. And, we're training together, and then we're racing together, and we're racing against some of my best friends. And while we're racing, we generally want everybody to be their best and do their best, set personal records. And meanwhile, we're racing and competing against each other. And, so it's kind of every man for himself at that point. But, it's such an interesting dynamic when you get involved with that kind of brings out the best in everybody.
Sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about this for myself the other day, because I don't compete very much. But I do participate in cycling, which is an individual sport, right? But it's so much more it's so community-oriented because, like Sean said, and like you were talking about, you see other people doing this and pushing themselves, and that helps you push yourself even further.
Oh, my God. I mean, when I was coming up in the world of triathlon, I played team sports growing up, so I'm playing baseball and football, basketball and soccer, and when I started multi-sport, I'm racing against people that were, D1 collegiate swimmers and D1 collegiate, track stars and runners. And I was none of those. So I didn't have the swimming background. I didn't have the running background. I certainly didn't have the cycling background. So, I was always training with people that were better than me. So that inherently pushed me to work harder and be better. And when I kind of focused on, I said, you know what, well, my niche is going to be the bike, and I'm going to put in all my energy and effort into the bike, because that's the one area where I can differentiate myself for triathletes from some of the folks that I'm racing and training with. So, when I I guess it was over the winter, I came back the spring kind of stronger and stronger as I had ever been, and was able to kind of start to leverage the ability for me to become middle of the roads, swimmer and runner, but, kind of excel at cycling and in triathlon. You put all those three together, then that kind of led to some pretty good success. So I was really thrilled with that.
So going back to where you started, did you say that New York Marathon was your first one?
That was my first one. So it was funny story. It was maybe April when I registered for the lottery, because it was always something I'd always wanted to do. And, I'd been out of college for, I guess, 5 years at that point, and I wanted to do a marathon. So I signed up in the lottery, and I got my notification that said, "Congrats, you have been accepted to the marathon." And this was like in May at this point. And so I said, wow, I don't really know what to do. So I'm just going to Google a training plan and just kind of try to figure it out. And also at the same time, I said, well, Saturday there's a local 5K. Let me use that as a litmus test and see kind of where I'm at and make sure I can actually do this and finish this anyway. So I finished that clearly. And then, I did a few more, and I used that training, let's put it in quotes, liberally. But I got through it and finished in 4 hours and 2 minutes. And my goal was just to finish. But, the pretty cool thing about sports in general, specifically the ones that I do, is you get in what you put out. And you can see your training and success correlate year over year. So the first year it was 4:02, but the next year I did the marathon, it was 3:38. And then the following year it was a 3:24. And then it was a 3:14. Then eventually I ran a 2:52. So, when so like for me, that was inherently motivating in and of itself. And then again, I mentioned the group of people that I started training with that helped push me to be the best that I could be. So that was pretty cool.
That's impressive.
So you talk about your good finishes and stuff. Tell us about, like, what are your top, what are some of your best finishes that you did in multi-sport?
Yeah, so I growing up in the sport in New Jersey, I mean, there were a lot of local races in New Jersey and New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, that I was able to participate in. And I remember when I won my first local sprint, I mean, I thought that was the greatest thing ever. They had a ribbon and tape across the finish line. Meanwhile, there were only like 350 competitors, but for me, I feel like I could have just won the Olympics, and that was pretty cool. So that was definitely a memorable experience for me. But as my times kept getting better and faster, those were obviously really important parts in my sports career journey, as well as and I had won quite a few local sprint races. I won a half a marathon. And, I won a half Ironman race. It wasn't a huge one, but I mean, it was a win nonetheless. But, there were races outside of those specifically where, I won this race or I PR'd that, I look back and I say, I'm most proud of these. And I'm most proud of these because, there were things that I overcame during the race, leading up to the race, could be the hot conditions, could be the competitors or, whatever it was. And specifically, I look back on Ironman New York back in 2012. And this was something where I was training for Ironman Arizona. I was trying to punch my ticket for the Ironman World Championships. And it was 3 weeks before the race, and someone in one of my club groups sent an email out and said, "Hey, I have a free entry, a free entry into Ironman New York. It was a charity slot. Our group's not using it. Does anybody want it?" And literally within less than a minute of him sending that email, I replied, "Yes, I'll take it." And I thought, well, you know what? I'll use it as a training day. So I did, but using that mentality, I was able to PR, and still to this day, it was my fastest Ironman I ever did on a really hot, humid, hilly day in New York. And that was probably, and we'll talk about some more recent stuff, development, but from before, that was probably my most proudest moment of a race that I really put together. I executed like I knew I could, and I was just, very pleased with just the overall outcome and performance of that day. So that was one of the ones that I look back and I'm like, this is why I do what I do and why I love the sport.
Certainly
nice.
something to be proud of for sure, especially with only a few weeks to go before it's time.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
That way it gave me a chance not to overthink it, right? I didn't want to have to outthink the room. So I just said, well, I guess I'm racing in 3 weeks. So here we go.
nice. So, Glenn, tell us about your injury. How did it happen, and what were the results of it?
Yeah, so on May the 14th, 2014, I was down in my home state of Texas and just finished Ironman Texas. And again, chasing this elusive, Ironman World Championship slot, I missed it again. And, I blame the heat, I blame everything, but, I just didn't put it all together. So I'm back in New Jersey training for Ironman Canada later in the year in August. And it was June the 12th, 2014. And I'm on a 42-mile morning training ride, one I do, multiple times a week with groups of friends. I was by myself at this point. On mile 32, a car made an illegal U-turn and hit me, and I was instantly paralyzed from the chest down.
Wow, man. So that probably led to a hospital and, recovery for... How long was that? What was going through your head during that time?
Yeah, so along with just being paralyzed, I had 9 broken ribs, a fractured jaw, scapula, blood clots, collapsed lungs. So I was in ICU for over a week, and the main hospital for a full month, and then I went to an outpatient or inpatient recovery facility in West Orange for 2 months after that, and I was in bad shape. I was in race weight, and then not being able to move and being immobile. I lost like 25 pounds and just, obviously the world comes crashing down and, everything changes. So you have to figure out, hey, how am I going to pick up the pieces and move on? And one thing I always say is, I have to live life through the windshield and not the rearview mirror. But when you're in that moment, right, it's tough. Forest for the trees, and it's for someone that was in the best shape of my life and very independent, self-sufficient, to have to all of a sudden instantly rely on everybody else. That made things pretty difficult.
When you talk about having to pick up the pieces and, like you said, live life through the windshield, what were, maybe it is relying on other people, but what would you say is that one of the biggest emotional challenges you had to overcome to get back on the bike or to get back into the world of sport? Obviously, we know that you still have an incredible reputation as a para athlete, but I'm sure you didn't just, well, maybe you did, after the accident, you're back on your bike a few months later. What were some of the things you had to work through emotionally to get to a point where you said, okay, despite what I'm up against, I'm gonna keep doing it?
Yeah, so when I was in the hospital at Kessler, I was in a power wheelchair, and I couldn't even begin to think about pushing around a manual wheelchair just because of my physical limitations at that point, not only being paralyzed, but the broken shoulder and everything else. But I knew, and I saw some of the exercises that the PTs and OTs were having me do, and I knew that if I could find something like a sport to kind of set a goal, again, no different than I did before, but to say, I'm going to get a hand cycle, for example, and that's what's going to help me build up strength, to become more functional, to be able to roll around in my wheelchair, to go back to work, right, to roll down the city, New York, where I work. That's what's going to allow me to become the person that I want to be. So I was able to find the Challenged Athletes Foundation at that minute, and I realized they support a lot of athletes like myself that are, paralyzed athletes in wheelchairs or amputees or whatever it may be, not only get back into the game of sport, but really the game of life. And, I was able to talk to one individual that had hand cycled in the Paralympics years before, and, excuse me, he really resonated with me, and he knew it was kind of mutual. He knew that I was going to be somebody that was going to be able to follow in kind of his footsteps and utilize this new tool in this avenue to get back to the person and athlete that I need to be and really wanted to be. So I filled out a grant and, worked with the Challenged Athletes Foundation, and it was April of the following year. And it was March of 2015 that my hand cycle arrived in the mail. And so we quickly put it together, and all my friends knew that it was coming. And, I live in New Jersey, so we had, I remember we had like 3 feet of snow on snowbanks outside, and it was probably 30 degrees, and there's some great photos of me and 6 of my really good training buddies out at Liberty State Park, rolling around for about 12 miles. And it was a really, really hard 12 miles, but I knew from that moment, kind of like after the first marathon, that this is going to allow me to get back, and this is what I'm going to do, and it's going to be amazing.
What a huge testament of not allowing your circumstances to define what you can do and who you can become, or who you can continue being. I guess in your case, less than a year later, you're on hand cycle, just figuring that out. That's inspiring for sure.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. I think that, especially with your story, Glenn, something that struck me as I was, looking at your videos and speeches and stuff like that leading up to this, is that I feel like your circumstance is separate from your goal and your mindset. Like, you have this mindset of being an athlete. Like, I'm an athlete. That's what I really, really want to do. And no matter what happens, I want to keep doing that. And I think that's really amazing to have, your will and your goals be more powerful than the things that happen to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, in all honesty, I mean, it is something that's really important to me. And I knew that this was something that was going to allow me to be able to, get back to being not only a productive citizen, but a family member and a friend to, my entire group. And, what I could tell was a lot of people fed off of kind of my emotions and how Glenn was feeling. And it was reciprocal when I was in the hospital, when people would visit me or call or check in. People didn't necessarily know what to say, but I said, you know what, when the time's right, we're going to go for a bike ride together. We're going to go for a swim together, just like we used to. And I think that was kind of galvanizing for so many people. And, I see people that are in rehab there in hospitals that I think need that challenge and need something to really look forward to and work for. And this goes with paralyzed individuals or able-bodied individuals, right? I mean, one thing I always try to tell people is you got to set goals and you got to put it out there. I mean, and if you're trying to do your first 5K, right? I mean, there's Couch to 5K. There's all sorts of things that you can do to, motivate yourself and really challenge yourself. And unlike a lot of things in life, you get that instant feedback of, well, I did a 5K today and my time was X, and a month from now I trained and I improved by 5%, so that was motivating for me, especially when I did my marathons. I mentioned that a little earlier, but I know that not only that, but you look at the community that is there to support everybody, right? That alone, I think, can really help people overcome obstacles that they're faced with in their life and what they potentially perceive as being obstacles to getting involved in sports.
Yeah, we would definitely want to argue with you there. Kyle and I, we talk about it a lot. It's your community, or any community, is what really helps people get through life. And I think that's true no matter what the circumstances are. I enjoy that.
Yep, I agree. So, Glenn, before you talked about somebody who sort of mentored you when you were first injured. And so in mentored you in sport and stuff, how do people go about finding that and making that happen for themselves, like finding a mentor to look up to?
Yeah, so, I mean, the two biggest organizations that come to mind is, one is the Challenged Athletes Foundation. And, you guys know, I mean, we're not the first to go to this, and we're certainly not going to be the last. And, people have been open books with sharing information, around what works, what doesn't work, and what they suggest. So I would check with the Challenged Athletes Foundation, and last year they gave over 90 grants for 96 different sports. So there's something for everybody. And then there's also Achilles, right? Depending on where you live in the country. I think there's other organizations as well, but those are two of the biggest in the country that support, our community and will help you find something to get you involved and find people that you can connect with that can give you inspiration or give you advice on how best to go about, getting involved or find the right sport that's right for you.
Cool. We will link those two organizations in the show notes. Glenn, what's on deck for you? What's the next couple of races that you have on your agenda?
Yeah, so at this point we're in 2019, and I'm trying to find a way for it to be better than 2018, which I had to make better than 2017. But in 2018, I did some really cool things, which ended up with the Ironman World Championships in Kailua, Kona, Hawaii, which was always a lifelong dream of mine. And then also immediately after that, I did the New York City Marathon again. And this year I was the first ever to do one of the majors as a runner, a hand cyclist, and in the racing wheelchair. And in order to do that, obviously you have to be paralyzed, which I don't encourage everybody to go for that record. However, pretty cool nonetheless. But at this point, I just got back from the Disney Marathon weekend where I set a new PR in the pushing race chair for me, which was a goal of mine this off season. I'm going out to LA to do the LA Marathon in March, the New Jersey Marathon in April. I'm doing a half Ironman in June. And then my goal is to be able to qualify for Boston in the racing wheelchair for the following year. So I got a couple other marathons scheduled, and you know me, I'm addicted to the sport, so I'll probably throw in some form of another half Ironman or maybe even another full Ironman down the road. But I'm waiting to see how things evolve a little bit, over the next few months.
You just gonna throw in another Ironman, and I'm over here trying to figure out how to throw in 10 miles on the bike trail. Are you doing this full time? I'm assuming you're sponsored, and this is your life today.
No, I do. I train almost what would consider to be full time, but no, I have a full time day job. Gotta pay the bills as well. But it's a hobby, but it's a hobby that evolves into a very significant portion of my life. So and it's important to me. And again, I have most of my close friends are involved in the sport, and we train together. And so when we get to going to kill two birds with one stone and hang out and release some endorphins and push ourselves. Can't think of a better way to spend some quality time with some of my best friends.
Absolutely. I love it. And I'm motivated to actually get out today and move my body. It's sunny for once. Man. So right. So quick question. I'm putting you on the spot, Glenn. Have you and your best friends or any of your close friends thought about climbing any mountains?
Well, funny you say that. We haven't literally climbed a mountain, but in 2017, I forget what even year I'm in these days. In 2017, a good friend of mine went and we didn't per se climb a mountain, but we did the Grand Fondo from Vancouver to Whistler. And as you can imagine, it's a big ski resort. So it was on the hand cycle. About 75 miles was 100K, and that was as much of climbing a mountain as I'm really into at this point. But it was a lot of fun. It was a ride actually I did on my bike back in 2012, I believe, and then went back and tried it again this year, or 2017, which was pretty neat. But it was cold and raining, and that wasn't ideal, but it was beautiful and had a great time.
That's awesome. All right, cool. Good to know. I asked because Kyle and I are both connected to an organization or a nonprofit that is in the midst of helping people in a circumstance similar to yours or mine or Kyle's climb mountains. So we'll hit you up if we think we've got an opportunity that might make sense for you.
Absolutely. I'm always up for a challenge, that's for sure.
Sounds like it. All right, Glenn. Well, you know what? I really think the conversation with you has been incredibly valuable. I know for me and hopefully for our listeners. And we really thank you for spending some time with us. Sean, was there one more thing I see?
No, it's great. Perfect timing. Glenn, would you mind just telling us where our listeners can find you and follow you?
Sure. Glenn Hartrick, then Glenn with 2 N's, Hartrick, Hartrick on Facebook, Instagram. I really appreciate the time, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisabled.dudes.com and please subscribe on the iTunes. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins.
Until next time, keep living with urgency.